Josh, I've heard so much about you that I'm just really excited to have this conversation today. So welcome to the show.
I appreciate it, Boomer. Nice to connect with you, and I'm happy to be here. Um, I don't normally look like this with all this red hue, but I guess it is what it is right now, right?
Well, I was wondering if you're trying to adapt to the fact that I live in Amsterdam, but that would be signaling something else. And since you're in your morning right now, it may not be the right signal.
Right, exactly, exactly.
And so here, we're going to kick things off with that. Josh, you've spent some time in Europe, and I want to talk a little bit about your background in basketball. What what drew you over to Europe, and where did you spend your time?
Well, yeah, good question. So, my life has many different twists and turns, and one of my first true loves, I guess, after martial arts, is basketball. And
Hmm.
so, I played basketball at a high level, starting from playing in high school, and then my wrist broke, my knuckles broke, my toes, like multiple toes. Um, I had so many different types of setbacks that I kind of thought, you know what, maybe my basketball career is over. So upon getting work in my field in advertising and marketing, I did that for a couple of years. I just kind of thought, you know what, I wanna do something more with my life. So I just kind of up and moved to New York, and while in New York, I kind of got started with a modeling and acting career, and the only thing that I could kind of think of that would allow me to stay in shape in the meantime, like whenever I wasn't actually working out, was to play basketball.
Okay.
And so I started playing basketball at a gym, which back then was the Reebok Sports Club. And I joined a couple of leagues. Some guys asked me to be on their team, and one thing led to another. I started, like, I guess in terms of basketball lingo, we would say I was crushing it. I was killing it,
Hmm.
and and a few guys were like, dude, like, did you, where did you go to school? And I told them I played at a very, very small college in Oklahoma. Then I went to an even smaller university after that, and
What
and they
university?
well, so the junior college I went to is called Rose State College. I went there
Hmm.
for a couple of years, and then I went to Northwestern Oklahoma State University, very small
Okay.
school. And they were kind of like, dude, you should have been playing, like, overseas at least, or in the D League, which is now called the G League. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm a late bloomer. And so one thing led to another. I had a couple people come and scout me from that gym, and lo and behold, I was able to get a couple opportunities to play overseas. So I got a gig. It was a short stint. Both of my gigs were short stints overseas, but I played in Qatar first,
Okay.
and that was wild because I was sort of battling a shoulder injury I which was one of the first times that I had to learn how to kind of rehab, but I also learned what it's like to be on opiates or to be on, like painkillers, and
So
how that
what
kind of.
we
Mhm.
can go down the opiate route in a second, but what kind of opiates are we talking about here? Was this like full on OxyContin, or was it something else?
Well, yeah, it was whatever I could get my hands on.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Like, to be honest with you, and I don't have an addictive personality at all,
Hmm.
but it was, you know, I kind of struggled with wanting to get a true diagnosis because I didn't want that to keep me from getting onto a team,
Hmm.
and I would have to kind of buddy up to the trainers or any of the people that could get me some painkillers, and I had to have that literally during practice. Sometimes we had 2-a-day practices, and it got to the point where I'm a point guard, shooting guard. It got to the point where, and I've always been known as a good defender. I couldn't even swipe. I couldn't lift my arm to swipe at the ball
Hmm.
with my right arm, and I had to do everything with my left. I would even have to catch passes with my left hand. And, I was still able to do decent, but it's just kind of one of those stories where it just slowly but surely, I just never was playing at my tip top when I
Mm-hmm.
needed to. And so I ended up losing out to a very good point guard from China.
Mm-hmm.
He was an American guy, but he was a veteran that played in China. But to kind of lose out to somebody who had a family at the time and needed the gig more than I did, I was like, it's all good. So then I came back to New York. I was doing some more modeling and acting stuff. And then I got another gig with my buddy, Derek Lang. He got me a gig in Mexico. And
Okay.
so I played in Mexico for a little bit. And then that's kind of when I was like, you know what? I think I see the writing on the wall with this whole basketball thing. It's all about who you know. I was peaking in age, but wasn't necessarily peaking in talent, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
at least from the perspective of the teams. And so I just took the opportunity to like party my butt off because I was in Cancun. I was
Oh,
playing.
okay. So you weren't even in Mexico City. It's Cancun, and so
It was Cancun
okay.
of all places. It was the Los Pioneros, and and that's when I kind of picked up Spanish, and I was just looking towards other things. I had a blast, but I had a short stint there as well, if you can imagine.
Mm-hmm. So the Qatar and the Mexico experience, prior to that, were you traveling much abroad, or were those sort of your first experiences abroad?
That was basically my first experiences.
Okay.
Yeah, my actual first experience traveling was to the Bahamas, and this was
Mm-hmm.
when I was in college, and at that time I had a broken wrist. So
Mm-hmm.
I was in Bahamas with our basketball team, the college basketball team at Northwestern Oklahoma State, and I wasn't able to actually play. I mean, I was out there with a cast on, going through warm-ups and stuff. But, my first time actually traveling and working was when I believe it was when I went to Qatar for that gig. So,
Wow. So out of the frying pan and quite literally into Doha, which is,
yep.
fire. Very, very interesting transition, so to speak, I can imagine. But all right. So where does the men's health and the movement come into play? Because you mentioned martial arts before, and I imagine that played some sort of an interest in your movement practice. But I guess first things first, what was the martial art of choice?
So, I always like to say I was born into the martial arts realm,
Hmm.
the Eastern philosophy. And the reason why I say born into it is because my mom and dad had a family business of martial arts. And so my
Hmm.
dad, he sort of created his own style, and which was a blend of styles that he interacted with throughout his journey.
Hmm.
So that it's kind of a cool story because it's called American Karate System, and the
Hmm.
way it works is, in the beginner belts, it's mostly like Taekwondo,
Yeah.
because that's what my dad first learned.
Hmm.
And then it kind of developed into Goju-Ryu, Kempo, a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, and then even some African styles. And that all was kind of the journey that my dad took. And so he was like, okay, he felt that he learned a great deal of things from the different styles. He didn't think that one style was the all-knowing or the greatest. He felt that a blend of styles was probably the best way for a person to learn and adapt to the martial arts.
Hmm.
And this was kind of around the time, and in fact a little bit before, the mixed martial arts scene or the
Hmm.
UFC scene. And so I kind of thought that was interesting. It seemed like my dad kind of was ahead of the times when he created his style. And so for me, it was very normal to, as at 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, going to karate tournaments and sitting there and with my dad and my brother and my mom, we'd sit there and we would analyze the competition. We would
Hmm.
analyze who it is I was going to fight next.
Hmm.
And we would go, oh, okay, that person is predominantly Taekwondo. Okay, we know how to defend against that.
Hmm.
And, that person's mostly, fights in close. And so we know how to defend against that. And so it was a really cool way for me to like build my brain and to build
Hmm.
my culture, my background. There goes the light off.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was my start. I was born into it. And so for me, it was just kind of like it was nature. It was like the back of my hand, you know?
And this is in Oklahoma, right? Where
Yeah.
it's not, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's not traditionally what I would think of as a martial arts state. I grew up a little bit in Kansas, which was definitely not a,
Ah.
so, I mean, is Oklahoma, I take it there is quite a bit of martial arts there if you were
Well,
participating.
yeah, there is. Are you familiar with the company Century? Century, I think it's called Century Martial Arts. Are you familiar with that company?
I've heard of it, but it's been a while since I've delved into the martial arts realm.
Yeah, it's like one of the biggest martial arts manufacturers. So they
Okay.
make, gloves and pads and, all kinds of gis and the whole nine. That their headquarters was in Oklahoma City at the time.
Okay, so you could have just said like, "Hey, Boomer, no, Oklahoma's a big hub for martial arts." But I appreciate you you making me feel a little bit better.
All
So
good.
let's when we start to bring you a little bit along on your focus into movement. And my understanding is you had some experience with men's health. And did that play a role in your focus on movement, or was it more your upbringing in the martial arts?
Great question, and good job on you for having to try to tame this wild mind of mine that just kind of goes in these rabbit holes.
I've got a wild mind too. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah. So yeah, the whole men's health thing was a culmination of all of my curiosities and background experiences that led up to my being in New York City. And
Mhm.
so, yes, you're right in that it probably started with martial arts. I because of my dad's background, not only in the different martial arts, but also with his style, he wanted to make sure that every person that was within his karate class or his school, they knew anatomy,
Mhm.
first aid. We had to know very well how to defend ourselves, but also be able to take care of ourselves in any situation. And so understanding the anatomy and first aid for like a young kid, pre-teens, was a big deal,
Yeah.
and one might wonder, well, why would that be such a big important thing for to implement into a school? Well, ultimately the idea was my dad was a chief of police in my hometown. So the
Mhm.
karate school was like a side thing. He was a chief of police. He was an EMT, and he also was a storm chaser, right? And so, and he also was a massage therapist and a carpenter. So if you can imagine why I do all these things today, it's because, I kind of emulated what my dad does with
Mhm.
his experience. But um, when I learned the skeleton and then the muscles and then the all the different attachments and the organs and all these things at a young age, it was like a fascination beyond imagination. I would have dreams about what the skeleton does, and so that's what created my fascination. But then after I got my black belt at the age of 12, it was my first sort of journey into other sports.
Mhm.
My dad was kind of like, look, you lived out my dream of, both of my sons making it to black belt. Now go forth and, do whatever sports you want to do. And so I jumped into basketball and baseball and track. And that's when I started to understand that, wait a minute, there's so many different ways to train the body,
Mhm.
because how I trained in martial arts was all about flexibility and speed. And, I was so fascinated with Bruce Lee and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. Right. But then basketball took me to the performance side of things,
Mhm.
and track took me to the performance side of things, the Western philosophies. Right. And then when I got to college, I was like, well, wait a minute, this trainer and this, athletic director and this group of people, they are saying the opposite of what we were saying in martial arts.
Mhm.
And then I also had a part-time job at GNC for like 6 years.
Mhm.
So then I started learning nutrition and supplements. And so all of this led up to my working on my body, working on my physique, working on my performance. And in order to kind of get out of Oklahoma and to try something different after I graduated, I reached out to a few magazines, and Men's Health magazine was one of the magazines.
Mhm.
And I was like, hey, I got some photos here that I did in a photography class in college. Do you think I could maybe get in your magazine? And they're kind of like, well, this is not quite how it works exactly, but we like your enthusiasm and we like your hustle. If you ever come to New York, we'd love to meet with you. And here's some agencies we work with. And that's the route I went down. And that's what happened with that. So,
So New York was because of Men's Health. It wasn't because you really wanted to be in New York, or was New York the end goal?
yeah, I would say Men's Health was one of the reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the main reason was I wanted to find an outlet to get me out of Oklahoma, not because I didn't like Oklahoma, but I kind of felt like I peaked. I kind of hit the ceiling of I don't want to say success, because it wasn't really dependent upon success, but I guess the peak of challenge, or the ceiling of challenge. I wanted to be challenged more, and
Yeah.
I knew that New York City and other big cities would be a challenge. And to be quite honest with you, I thought maybe it'd be cool at some point in the future to be able to tell my future child, hey, your dad was in a magazine, and I kind of thought that would be it. Whatever, just to kind of try something different. And then 15 years later, I'm still rock and rolling. So yeah.
Let's talk about movement philosophy, because this is, I want to get into sort of the journey about how you originally or you ended up with sort of your 4 pillars, if you will. Because one of the things that I love about movement, but at the same time is very challenging for a lot of people, is that there's so many different modalities that you can follow. And if you go into a bodybuilding magazine, sometimes that can be 3 hours of training 2 times a day, that kind of stuff, eating 6 meals, whatever it is. If you go into powerlifting and following sort of a West Side barbell modality, that can be very, very challenging to your nervous system. What are some of the things that you experimented with first along the way, and kind of the bumps in the road?
Um, I think the easy answer is all the above. Um, I think before biohacker was a known term,
Mm-hmm.
I was hacking, everything you could think of. And I think a lot of that came about because, one, back to me, earlier saying that I was a very curious person, and I still am. My curiosity is kind of what kept me busy, I guess. And for me, I was always trying to figure out ways to, like, I don't know, just to be better at everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like school was easy for me, to the point that, like, I was able to get an academic scholarship in college and things like that. And obviously I understood that that's one level of intelligence. But I tried the bodybuilding route. I tried the powerlifting route because that's what my brother did.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can imagine, back in the early 2000s, there was a big trend of bodybuilding, at least in Oklahoma. And I
Mm-hmm.
would go to different bodybuilding competitions. I never competed, but a lot of my friends did. And if you can imagine me working at GNC, all the meatheads that would come in,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I would get so many different questions. And every time there's a question, it's an opportunity to educate, whether
Yeah.
that I get I get the question or I give the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, that almost happened daily when I was working at GNC,
Mm-hmm.
right? So question would come in and somebody would ask for, hey, you guys got any, I don't know, magnesium, or, what's the best protein? And again, at a young age, someone who's kind of learning how to navigate this whole world of things, I would answer the question. And, if they had like a test for the employees at GNC, you could test to get like different levels. And like the more tests you took and you completed, the more commissions you can make based
Yeah.
on your qualifications. And if you can imagine, I'm the one, like, after hours sitting at that little computer. And my boss at the time would be like, Josh, you need to go home. Like, yeah, I'll lock up, don't worry. And I would stay there for hours just trying to complete the test. you know, and there would be times when when the computer would crash, because this was back in the day before laptops and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And but for me, it was, I wanted the knowledge. It was less about the pins I had on my shirt, even though my shirt was full of pins, but it was the knowledge of it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I've tried it all. I've tried the creatine routes. I've tried the, you know, the fasting routes. I've tried the vegetarian routes. I've tried the, you know, meat eater. I've tried it all. So I think that's what has enabled me to figure out what works well for me,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also helped me to figure out how to break down what works best for the people I work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that answers your question, but
Oh, it
there's a
does.
lot in there. Yeah.
Well, I wish everybody at GNC would have taken that time. Maybe the company would still be around today, but uh, movement specifically was the reason, just a specific interest in it? Because if you think about kind of health as that sort of semi-complex system, or there are plenty of levers that you can pull on, and it sounds like you're building a copious amount of knowledge in various domains.
Yeah.
What made you say, like, hey, this movement thing is where I want to focus my time?
Yeah, good point. And that also helps to answer fully, I think, that your previous question. It started with tweaking myself. And
Mm-hmm.
and you know, early in my career, if you will, it was all about sports performance for basketball.
Yep.
That was what I cared about most. And so at a very young age, you know, I quickly realized that, you know, with martial arts, it was all about flexibility. So I was the guy doing the splits and for commercials. And my dad was like, hey, you can watch TV if you are doing some kind of stretching in between, like during the commercials.
Very
Okay,
good
cool.
point. Yeah.
That was that for me, that was like, this makes sense. I'm going to stretch so I can watch TV, you know?
Yeah.
And then, okay, so that kind of served that role. And then for basketball, it was like, okay, well, how do you play basketball better? So I would watch lots of videos and I would break down this, and I'm like, okay, I need to practice if I want to be a better shooter, you know, and I can't necessarily be in the gym all day, every day. Then how can I emulate that? How can I get the closest to that experience at home? So I was the guy that would like get a basketball and I would lay on the ground and I would just shoot, and I would imagine, like, I would literally flick the ball up in the air and try to get it to come right back down. And
Mm-hmm.
that was creating this motor skill development, right? I didn't understand it as that then, but I understand it now. So I was
Mm-hmm.
creating this neural pathway, and I was just like fine tuning those motor skills, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, okay, if my shooting got better because I was doing that, then how can I jump higher? So then I had the strength shoes, or the jump soles. I don't know if you recall the jump soles back in the day.
No, but that sounds very interesting. You got to elaborate there.
Yeah, the jump soles are these, you know, I wouldn't recommend it nowadays, but it's basically a platform that's about this thick that goes on the ball of the foot.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put any shoe in it, and you insert your shoe into this platform, and then you Velcro it on, and it connects to the back of the heel, and it's kind of adjustable for any shoe. And you could walk around in it, you could run in it. And I was the guy that was like, hey, I see some, you know, in the magazines, you know, the East Bay magazines, I see
Yeah.
everybody talking about how, you know, this was back when N1 was huge.
Yeah.
And I saw some of the N1 guys who could jump really high. They were promoting it. And again, I didn't understand influencers back then. I didn't understand advertising, but I'm like, if that guy's doing it, I want to do it. So
Yeah. It's like Grant Hill when he was pushing Sprite to people, right? And
you
claiming
got
it.
it.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Exactly. So, you know, that was another opportunity for me to go, okay, practice this and that gets better. Okay, practice this and that gets better. And everything started clicking.
Mm-hmm.
So once I finished basketball, that was when I started to kind of realize that, because while I was playing basketball, it didn't matter what my body looked like necessarily. It was just, could I function the way I wanted to function?
Mm-hmm.
But when I finished basketball, I started to work on my aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I'm kind of like, oh, okay. So if I can work abs, you know, I had all the apparatuses for abs, you know, the
Yeah.
ab wheel And then also throughout all of this, by the way, I discovered that I have scoliosis.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah. So I had to figure out like ways to like stretch and hang and breathe into the concave parts of my body. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, again, it goes back to this, like with my own personal experiences, I'm able to figure out, okay, how do I fine tune my body and mind to become the best that I
Mm-hmm.
could, you know? I also did not drink until I was 21 because
Mm-hmm.
I was told that if you want to be a high powered functioning machine, then you got to treat it and put that kind of fuel into the machine. Well, that was my experience, you know? So, and I didn't do any kind of, you know, cannabis consumption or anything like that until well after college and things like that. So I was kind of honed in, and then now taking a step back and kind of undoing all of that, I kind of see, wait a minute, there's so many different ways to tweak the body. And so movement wise, I've understood that, you know, if I want to get stronger, then there's ways to go about doing that. And I found that body weight is the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Putting the feet in the earth, grounding is the foundation. I've always understood that being barefoot was a part of me. I didn't know why then.
Mm-hmm.
I know why now. You know, that gives me sort of my foundation. And so when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about the pillars and stuff, you know, I feel like we all have to have a foundation, and we build that foundation strong. And it's very cliche to say, you know, you build a house on a strong foundation, of course. What is that foundation?
Mm-hmm.
And I think of that foundation being awareness.
Yeah.
But then if we start from the ground up, that literally means to me starting working on your feet.
Mm-hmm. And
You know?
so can we go a little bit into that grounding aspect, because we'll get into these
Sure.
4 pillars, but how do you look at grounding in sort of everyday life and how people can practice it? Because yeah, from the biohacker world, there's a lot of people out there that are going and putting their feet in the grass, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you specifically work that in? And I know you have a bunch of time constrained clients. How does that look for somebody who has no time and lives in Manhattan?
Very good question. You know, there's I always like to break things down with like the low hanging fruit and the sort of non cost prohibitive methods, and
Mm-hmm.
then I go into the very high end. And I like to draw the sort of the connection between the two. So
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to grounding, I really truly feel like we all have the capability of doing grounding, no matter what time constraints are perceived, and no matter what industry we're in or whatever. I mean, it should be simple enough, should be, to go outside and put your feet in the earth at
Mm-hmm.
some point, right?
Yeah.
If you are in a situation that you feel like you cannot do that, or it's not safe to do that, then you can go the route of what we do in the biohacking tech world, which would be to get like a grounding mat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and then you could even go as far as like connecting to, you know, holding on to the sink, you know, the faucet handles, or, you know, you can go that route. But I always think it's easier just to go outside and put your feet in the grass or in the sand, or, you know, just connect to some level of grounding. All
Mm-hmm.
modern homes have some level of grounding. Otherwise, I mean, that's like one of the first things you do when you start with the foundation and you make sure that the house is ready to be built,
Mm-hmm.
is you figure out the foundation and then you figure out how to ground it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to run into a world of problems later.
Yeah.
Same with the body. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't figure out your foundation, you don't figure out how to ground it, right? Because we are electrical beings,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to be in a world of problems at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I treat it. And, you know, a lot of my high functioning clients, they do think I'm a bit crazy, but once they start to slowly understand what I mean by talking about our cells being capacitors and being like little phones or little batteries,
Mm-hmm.
each little cell, the trillions of cells we have in our bodies, if you treat those like batteries that need to be charged, then that ends up being kind of an understandable way of getting it, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
all of us have phones, or most of us have phones today. And what happens when that phone is about to die, or any of our devices today are about to die? We have this idea of like, I got to charge it, right? We all need that charge because we have to be connected. Same happens with our cells. So, so when I explain it that way, then it's like, okay, well then how do I do it? Remember, anytime there's a question, there's an opportunity to educate.
Yep.
And go down that path. So,
Amazing.
yeah.
So we got started on grounding in part of the 4 pillars. I cut you off because I wanted to go a little bit more deep on grounding. Let's get back to those 4 pillars, because I know grounding is one key aspect of it and probably the foundational key. But if you're going to go from there, how do you progress?
Okay, well, so I'll back up and kind of break down the pillars, because the pillars are actually updated. And
we've got a new one.
Yeah, I plan on putting out some more information via blogs and eventually maybe a book and things like that. But it started out as 4 pillars, and the 4 pillars were, and I use the descriptive term quality to kind of qualify each of the pillars, right? So it started out as being quality sleep and recovery. Grounding would have been a part of that, right? Because it helps to kind of normalize the body and the cells and things like that. So quality sleep and recovery was I felt at the time when I created the pillars was probably one of the most important things and the thing I talked about the most. And I treated each pillar as like a triage effect and sort of like a prioritization, right? And so the highest level would have been sleep and recovery. The next one would have been quality consumption. I also I feel like grounding can kind of go in there as well, because consumption doesn't have to only mean what you eat and drink, but it's also the energy you consume, right? Whether it be from the earth or whether it be from people. And again, that's very esoteric and can be, but if you go very like surface level, it's what you eat and drink. Okay. Yeah. So quality sleep and recovery, quality consumption. The next one would have been quality activeness, which we kind of, I think, falsely lump activeness and exercise together in the same thing, but I separate those. And I feel like, quality activeness is everything. Again, this is kind of cliche, but just being as active as you can be. So instead of sitting all day long, how about standing? And then, it's almost the opposite of stillness. Yeah. Because I think people, once they hear, oh, you shouldn't sit, so you should stand. Well, you can falsely or incorrectly stand and be still and have that be problematic as well, right? So just being active was one of the things that I was highlighting in the quality activeness. And then, of course, you can be far more active longer throughout your day than you can ever exercise, right? So you could truly be active for 6, 7, 8 hours a day, but it would be very detrimental to your body and to your health and to your mind to be exercising for that amount of time. So the lowest end of the totem pole would have been quality exercise. And within the exercise component, because I am a fitness trainer, obviously I could help to come up with a whole load of things, but I almost put that off to the side, because if you're doing steps 1, 2, 3 well, then the quality exercise becomes icing on the cake and becomes easy. So those were the 4 pillars until I started kind of diving more into the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza and started diving more into my own meditation practices. And, I never really understood what meditation was until I started really like doing some neurofeedback. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's something missing to my pillars, right? Because I find myself doing much more conversations and talks about meditation and awareness. So I quickly put number 1, quality awareness. And
that's a big one.
Yeah. So that's a recent thing, I would say, within this last year. And so quality awareness to me is, it almost doesn't even matter about quality sleep and recovery if you're not aware that you need quality sleep and recovery, right? Very true. Awareness works its way down through all of those. And so if you're truly aware that you need help, if you're truly aware that, the reason why we're not feeling so great right now with this pandemic, maybe is not because we're being told to wear masks and this and that. Maybe it's because we don't have this human interaction that we actually need, right? I mean, and you can go down the rabbit hole, of course, with all of that. But
Yeah.
now the 5 pillars are quality awareness, and then quality sleep and recovery, quality consumption, quality activeness, and quality exercise.
All right. So I'm going to try and remember all of those as we go. But let's start with that new one, because it's something that it's come to my own awareness recently, right? Like how important awareness is, how important just being present in this moment is, because if you're not present, like, it's really the only thing that we have. When people are starting to come to grips with things like anxiety, and you work with a lot of high performers, so there's a lot of goal setting, a lot of looking to the future. How do you bring them to a position where they realize that awareness is important? And we'll get into the practical modalities of training it in a second, but how do you bring them to that position? Because I mean, I was once one of these stubborn, goal-driven people that it's very hard to say, like, hey, dude, just be here now.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And throughout my extensive health coaching certification processes and whatnot, learning how to be a good health coach taught me how to ask important questions. And so that would be my answer to that question. It's, I can only, and again, I'll probably say this so many times throughout this interview, but it's all about asking good questions and then using these opportunities to educate, right? And so I can help a person, I can point out ways to be more aware by asking good questions. So for instance, let's say, you decide to work with Josh, right? And chances are I'm going to come in and ask, sit you down and let's talk about, first, what I want to do is see the mood and the sort of the aura of the person that's in front of me, right? And I'm going to sense right away, is this person overly anxious? Is this person stressed out? Is this person, what is the style of this person? And that is going to be, that's that innate nature that I have of being a people person, right? I can assess a person like this, right? And we could talk about this in later on, but I think growing up in a world where I was forced to kind of learn Eastern philosophies and chi energy and all these things, but also growing up in a very racist community, being one of the only Black people in my town, allowed me to be able to kind of dictate and read. So it was like my martial arts background allowed me to kind of assess a situation for like defending myself, right? You never know if you need to defend yourself. And you scan a room, kind of like, I learned this from my dad's police, law enforcement background, but also the martial arts background. But then also, hey, I realize I'm the only Black person in here. Like, how do you adjust to that, right? And I know this is like, wait a minute, how is this answering the question? But it's using all of this to assess the person that's in front of me. So I have to be present to ensure that the person in front of me is present, right? And so once I asked the question of, hey, so why is it you want to lose weight? Well, I've got I've got a wedding. Well, okay. So you got a wedding coming up. All right, great. So you want to fit in the dress, or you want to fit in the tux, and okay. But let's go beyond that. Like, why is it, is it because you want to see the photos for the rest of your life that looks like that? Well, let's break that down. And then we, at some point, get back to the childhood. And at some point, we get back to the point of being bullied in school. And then we figure out that, like, wait a minute, you're using this as a facade, as a costume. And, and I understand that you probably are afraid to be naked in front of your spouse, the person you're about to spend the rest of your life with. Whoa. That becomes way more of a conversation than how many reps should I do?
Yeah, that's almost getting into a therapy discussion, right? Almost.
Bingo. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you have the quintessential in New York City. This happens all the time, at least from my experience of living there and working in the financial district. You have that hyper anxious person that if you tell them that they're hyper anxious, they're just going to say, "Well, that doesn't," they're going to be a little bit perturbed by that. Is it just the delicacy in asking the question, or are you kind of taking them on a leading journey into bringing them to that moment where they just sort of say, "Hey"?
Okay, good point. I like to listen. I think
Hmm.
that was one of the biggest skills I had to learn or I discovered was a big part of sitting with people of that nature.
Hmm.
They sometimes just need someone to listen.
Yeah.
When I sort of report back to them what I'm hearing, they're like, a lot of times they're like, no, 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 that's not what I said. And I go, oh, okay. Well, then help me to realize then what it is you're saying. Because a lot of times what they're conveying is not what they're truly meaning to convey. And so that's what draws that awareness component, right? So
Hmm.
let's say, well, I feel like I need to work out at 6 a.m. because I have to work out before I go to work because at work I'm busy. I don't usually have a lot of time, and even at lunch I'm sitting here and doing that. And so to them, they're just breaking down their day. To me, I'm
Yeah.
hearing, whoa, way too much stress on this individual. Why
Yep.
add more stress to that?
Hmm.
Then I can go back once again to the pillar of awareness. So hey, let me let you know what I'm hearing.
Hmm.
Sounds like you got way too much going on to even focus on your health.
Hmm.
They're like, no, 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 I'm not saying that. I told you I'm waking up at 6 a.m. to focus on my health. And I go, well, to me, that doesn't say you're focusing on your health. It tells me you're trying to squeeze in something that may make you feel good for a moment that's really not making you feel good after all. And then
Hmm.
they're like, whoa, right? And don't get me wrong, like it doesn't always work, right? I have to be willing to say, and thankfully I'm doing well enough in my career that I can literally say, hey, look, I might not be the person for you,
Yeah.
you know, because if what you're telling me is that you're gonna wake up and work out every day at 6 a.m. whether you're supposed to or not, then how can I truly help you? I mean, I can help make you aware, but I'd rather you work with someone else because that's not what I think is going to help either of us in this situation,
Hmm.
because I don't want to wake up at 6 either. you know,
Yeah.
and like I mean, I've done that, right? But it's really about trying to create this back and forth where it doesn't poke them too much and send them off in the other direction, but
Hmm.
it gets them to engage. You want to let them know what you see, and it's almost like they call it mirroring,
Yeah.
but it's I could draw the same conclusion, and I could almost say the same thing for me and say, well, hey, you know what, I treat my sleep much more important than my exercise. So unfortunately 6 a.m. doesn't work for me,
Hmm.
so I won't be able to see you. Oh, well, okay, well then can you do after work? Unfortunately, training you after work doesn't work for me either, because I try to be home since I wake up so early and since I go to bed so early and I have to eat and I want to eat 3 hours before bed. That means I wouldn't be able to train you at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m.
Hmm.
Right. So then it's like, wow, this dude takes his health and wellness so seriously. Right. And so then it's like, okay, maybe they go and they work with someone else, and maybe a year or two down the line they come back and, well, I injured my shoulder, I injured my hip. What was that thing you were telling me about last year? And then it's just this ongoing thing. And I think with social media, that helps because I'm able to put a lot of things out there knowing that people are watching. They may not be
Yeah.
interacting and engaging, but they're definitely watching. And so all the time I'm getting, especially now during the pandemic, people are online more, right?
Yeah.
And so I know that I have this platform and I continue to push it, and I push that level. And because I know that it's talking to somebody somewhere, you know?
Hmm. Let's go into something you just said, which was that you prioritize sleep almost more than your exercise. And is that a general rule of thumb for most people? And if so, what are sort of like the Josh Holland keys to getting a good night's sleep?
Yes. Yes, yes, and yes.
Yes, yes, and yes. That's always good.
The uh, again, if you go back to the prioritization of the pillars, sleep is way above exercise.
Yep.
So, and the reason for that is because if you're getting quality sleep and recovery, then I feel like you're setting yourself up for more of an ability to be active and more of ability to actually exercise. And nowadays, now that we have things like the Aura Ring and different apps and tech, sleep tech, we can kind of show that, right? Or it would be, well, I feel great, so I'm going to work out. Do you really feel great though? You know, because when I'm sitting across from you, I can see that you probably are a little too anxious and you might need to sleep a little bit more. Or it may not even be all about sleep. It might be just the recovery aspect. That's why I labeled it sleep and recovery.
Yeah.
So instead of coming for a workout today, let's actually put you in a new calm session. These are things that I do, right? And so to answer your question about what is a good ways to ensure quality sleep, I definitely talk about the devices, right? And so like the blue white light spectrum and how that mimics the sun and how that could be harmful for you later in the evening. But also the importance of having enough of it in the earlier parts of the day so that we can reset and make sure we work within our circadian rhythms, right? Which is why at the beginning of this episode, I had the red light on, you know, just to mimic the sun, since I'm not outside right now, which would probably be a little bit loud if I was outside trying to do this interview with you. But
yeah, in downtown LA, that's probably hard to do.
Right, exactly. So, you know, I feel like it's easy for me to start showing people that, okay, if we set yourself up with, okay, let's get good quality light in the morning, whether that be with the sunlight or that's with some of the you know, the red light, the photobiomodulation devices. And it doesn't have to be expensive, but let's set yourself up early in the day with that, right?
Yep.
Then we start to slowly reduce that or change that to sort of mimic what it would be like if we were our ancestors, right? Where we didn't have a lot of artificial light. What would that look like? Okay. If you're a high performing person, you probably still need to use your phones and your computers, or at least think you do. So, okay, you can go the route with the glasses that block the blue light, or you can change all your devices, like the F-Lux or the Flux. You can, you know, do the different settings on the iPhones and things of that nature, or you can go to the extreme and just completely shut off all devices.
Novel concept.
Right, which, you know, it's novel in that it was all you could do back in the day, right?
That's true.
I mean,
until the advent of the BlackBerry, we really couldn't. There was not much that we could do. I mean, we had pagers maybe, but that was about it.
Right, and or, you know, of TV, but even that, you know, up to a certain point wasn't even possible, right? So it was the radio. But it's like, if you think about what it would be like to just put on some candles and have candlelight. Like I challenge anybody listening to this to do a week of only candlelight once the sun goes down and see how you feel. And you know, it's like, if you feel yourself getting tired sooner, then listen to your body. Again, back to the awareness. Listen to your body. Take out all the noise, right? Because that's what our epigenetic factors are giving us, is all this noise in terms of frequencies, right? Frequencies and vibrations, because even light is on a vibration and a frequency, right? So if you take away all of that noise, then what are you actually doing? And some people don't want to listen to that silence.
Yeah,
they don't listen.
They're terrified of silence, right?
Oof. Yeah, and they're terrified of what they're actually saying to themselves.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to the deeper conversation of awareness. And it'll always come back to that, right? So when I talk to somebody, it's going to always come back to that. That's why I had to update those pillars, because it's like, well, look, what's wrong with listening to what your mind is telling you? Why do you need to put the TV on? If you're trying to escape, that's fine. But how about escape by diving deeper into your mind? You know, and that's a novel concept, but shouldn't be, you know, that should be a norm for all of us. Like, take a moment to meditate. And if you feel like you're going to sleep, you're starting to yawn, go to bed.
Yeah.
Well, but you know, I need to make sure and eat. Well, if you've got unwanted body fat on your body, then that's internal feeding. So you are truly eating. So just go to sleep. But then I wake up and I feel hungry. Well, do you think our ancestors ever had to deal with that? Sure. That's fine. You can wake up but don't flip on the lights, you know. Maybe you would have starlight, or you'd have an ember light, or put on a you know, if you want to go fancy, you can get on a true dark red light bulb, or
Mm-hmm.
you could, you know, actually put on another candle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, there's ways to make all of this better. And so if you go to bed earlier and that forces you to wake up earlier, then what does that allow you to do? Allows you to get more shit done, right?
Yeah,
Allows you
absolutely.
to get work done. And then that goes back to the, well, you know, I've got all these things to do and I've got to wake up and whatever. Well, okay, use that time to actually allow your body to wake up naturally. Then you're going to feel better about getting work done. You're going to have less brain fog, hopefully, right? You're going to make better decisions with how you eat. And then you're going to have better decisions in truly understanding when it's time for you to work out.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
I feel preachy right now, but
No. I love it. I love it. So let's go over onto that other aspect of this particular vertical, which is recovery. And recovery is something that I've become fascinated with after blowing up my nervous system a few times, doing various competitions and things. How do you look at recovery for clients, and what are some of your favorite modalities for recovery?
So again, back to the low hanging fruit and sort of the easy to grasp and then all the way up to the high end. The easiest thing for me is, as I would say, breathing.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that we can all focus on and do. And that's kind of what I have around my neck right now. One of the cool tools I'm playing with called the relaxator. I don't know if
I haven't played with that one, but you
cool.
always feed me cool tool ideas. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, this one's fun. And all it is just a breathing tool to teach a person how to breathe slower.
Yeah.
To breathe slower and to breathe less. And it's by this group, Conscious Breathing. And so breath work is, I think, one of the biggest tools that we have to truly optimize the human body. So breathing is probably one of the best things we can do for recovery and just for optimizing everything. Then I would say quality sleep. So, you know, trying to figure out how to sleep, how to try to maximize your sleep. So getting the right supplements. If you don't sleep well, you figure out you don't sleep well. And then the next thing I would say would be cold showers. So I feel like cold showers is something we can all do. And we can do that every day. So that's pretty easy. So we can breathe, right? And that's relatively free.
If you don't do it, you're in trouble. So
right. And then sleep, you know, maybe, okay, we can all do that. And some of us feel like we don't need to do that, but I think that's very false and not cool. And then we all, I think, shower every day, right? So
most of us do.
Most of us do, right? So then, okay, how do you use that time to help your recovery? And I feel like it's interesting that people are afraid to take a cold shower. That does not make sense to me. I do understand that it's getting out of the comfort zone, but I feel like we need to get out of the comfort zone more often than staying in the comfort zone all the time. Because getting out of the comfort zone, you know, we can label that as a hormetic effect or hormesis, but that's essentially what we're doing with exercise, right? You're dipping out of that comfort zone of just chilling and hanging out. But I feel like we can do that too much and it becomes problematic. So where do you find that balance? And you can find that balance by also getting out of the comfort zone with the temperature in your home, the temperature of your shower, the, you know, dipping into, let's say, like whenever I say cold showers, people automatically go, oh, I couldn't do that. What do you mean you couldn't do that? If the power went out, like it just did in New York, you know, or all along the East Coast, the power goes out, hot water's not working. What are you going to do? You're either not going to shower or you're going to figure out a way to wash yourself.
What percentage of people you think went without a shower instead of going for the cold one? I'm just kind of curious. I bet it's a fairly significant percentage.
I would think that it's probably a significant percent that went without, and it's unfortunate. Not because I feel like showers are what we need to do every day, right? Because that's also, you can go to the extreme there too, right? Washing off the beneficial bacteria on our skin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, we can always go down rabbit holes with conversations together.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a fun one. But it's like, okay, sure, getting out of your comfort zone and not taking a shower, could that be a thing? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But are you hiding from having to take a cold shower and claiming that that's what you're doing is getting out of your comfort zone to kind of be smelly for a little bit? Come on, let's just take a cold shower for a moment.
Yeah.
And then whenever everything is perfectly normal, taking a cold shower doesn't mean automatically putting it on cold and jumping in. Start with your comfort. That's okay. Start with the warm shower or the hot shower, but finish with cold.
Yep.
And see, go back to the awareness, right? Because it's always going back to the awareness. Be aware of what your body is doing the moment, not even when it goes cold, but the moment that you reach to turn it to cold.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what is happening in your body. Most of us, if they're not used to doing it, most of us are going to freak out, right? Like our nervous system is quickly going to sympathetic response the moment we even reach for it.
Yep.
Then the moment it goes cold, it's like the anticipation of it going cold is even more of a sympathetic response. That's fight or flight. Okay. But then there's this beautiful moment of being like, oh, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
I didn't get killed. Yeah, it's cold. Of course it's cold, but I purposely made it cold, right? And when you can settle in for about, and sometimes it takes 10 seconds, sometimes it takes 30 seconds. Sometimes it takes a long time for you to finally figure it out that, hey, I'm not going to die if I do this. And it does get better to the point where, I do this all the time, every single day. And here in LA, I have to say the water doesn't get nearly as cold as it does in Europe. Or
when I lived in Singapore, I couldn't get cold enough water. It was just that,
Right.
But here it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's like I ask people to do that and let that become a part of their day, and I can tell if a person's truly doing it or not, because like when I was on tour with Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. He's a guy that is a high functioning person that I love working with, because he's someone that will literally take whatever it is I suggest and he'll run with it. Right. And it'd be funny because when I would see him each day, I could tell if he was doing the cold showers or not, based on even my experience. Right. Like, let's say we'd be somewhere and I'm trying to think of places that were really, really cold. Anyway, when I was on tour, we were in Europe, and there was a few places that was just like frigid, right? When you would take a cold shower, and I would kind of just wait to see if he'd say anything, and he'd be like, "Man, this morning was cold," or "Last night was cold," and I'm like, "Oh, that's cool," because I know he's doing it, and the amount of recovery you can gain from that helps with sore muscles, helps with joint pain. But it also allows your body to deal with that hormetic effect, right? It allows your body to kind of warm you up. And if you can do that before sleep, and that might help you to go to sleep better, faster. You can do that to wake you up, like a shot of coffee in the morning, or you can do both. And so then you can also take it to the high extreme and do cryotherapy or ice tubs, cold tubs and things of that nature, which obviously I do and I enjoy, but the low hanging fruit is just going to your shower.
Amazing. When it comes to because recovery is getting a lot of attention from innovative and inventor type people, and a lot of people are focusing on the science behind it in this space. Do you have a favorite tool that you're playing around with now? You've mentioned one earlier, but any sort of favorite tools that you have noticed that are extremely successful among your clients for recovery?
To measure like the recovery?
Not necessarily measurement, but more of like an acceleration. So like for instance, I have sitting right here the Apollo, which I've used to manipulate my state multiple. There he goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I stole Dasha's, and I told Dave Raven when I had him on the podcast that he's not getting that one back. But any particular ones that you enjoy, maybe other than the Apollo as well?
Yeah, there's so many. Um, I would probably have to say, and again, it goes back to like the low hanging fruit. Um, I feel like red lights,
Yeah.
the photobiomodulation technology is probably ubiquitous enough
Hmm.
to where I could say, hey, just go and find some kind of red light.
Yeah.
Um, for a while, I feel like Juve sort of had the game sort of cornered,
Yeah.
the market cornered, but now there's so many. I mean, there's so many out there now. So I feel like red lights are kind of the easiest for people to get into and wrap their heads around, and you
Hmm.
can find it almost anywhere. And then I do really enjoy the Apollo. I think the Apollo is a very interesting tool that causes people to ask questions.
Yeah.
They always ask questions with it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's a given. Let me think. What else? Any kind of PMF technology.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not. It may be on the higher end because they can be a lot more expensive, and there's so many out there.
Yeah.
But any kind of like like Flex Pulse, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
is a good one that I use and I travel with.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go a little bit higher end with maybe like a Beamer, or very high end with like a Pulse Center's
Yeah.
PEMF.
Yeah.
Um, again, it just depends. Does a person, what are their resources like, right? Like if they have, if money is no object, then okay, let's go to the highest end and let's set you up for the best.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're having to kind of monitor your finances, then let's give you access to places that would kind of round out your week. And
Yeah.
so you could go to a center that has that, or another one actually that is pretty easy to deal with is molecular hydrogen.
Yeah.
So like having molecular hydrogen tablets does a lot for the body. I'm also a huge fan of ozone.